Good day, everyone. Welcome back to Reading and Writing. For our eighth lesson, we will be talking about finding textual evidence. So for today's lesson, the first thing that we have to do is, of course, define textual evidence. And then we will be going through how to find these pieces of evidence while reading a text. Okay, similarly, we will also be discussing the different text features as well as how we can cite different textual evidence. Before we proceed with our lesson for today, try to examine the different pictures and try to figure out what happened. Is it murder or is it suicide? Now, in reading and writing, there are also certain pieces of information from a text that you have just read, okay, that would eventually back up whatever you are trying to say about that particular text or particular piece of written work. Okay, it might support, for example, your beliefs, your opinions, your inferences, okay, what you have thought about that particular text from what you have just read. Now, these pieces of evidence are what we call as textual evidence. You can easily remember the different ways on how to find textual evidence by remembering the phrase prove it. Every letter stands for one particular technique or one particular place where we can find textual evidence. The first one, of course, is P, which we could also refer to as paragraph or passage. Okay, now how do we do that? Meaning, in a particular piece of text, your textual evidence could be found in a particular paragraph or a particular passage. And this paragraph, this particular passage could be used to support your belief, your opinion, your interpretation of that particular text. Next, of course, is reference. This next technique of finding textual evidence is simply trying to reference or trying to pinpoint an exact location of this particular evidence or an idea, a concept that would provide support to whatever you are trying to say about that piece of work. Take, for example, the phrases such as on the first paragraph, on the third paragraph, or on the next part, on the last part, and the first part, and so on and so forth. That technique is what we call referencing. Next is O, or offers support. You have to remember that just because the evidence is in the selection, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will provide support or evidence to a particular idea. Okay, you really still need to make the connection between that piece of evidence and that idea of yours. Okay, so you try to find relationships among those things and then try to figure out if this particular piece of the text could really be presented as evidence to the idea that you are trying to make or trying to present as well. Next is the view of the author. This is very important because the view of the author is a clear manifestation of his or her objective. Okay, so what or how the author presents the information, how the author provides the information is also a clear manifestation of the objectives. Therefore, when you present the view of the author as a textual evidence, or when you are using the view of the author to finding textual evidence, you always need to link it back to the objective. Okay, what was the objective of the author in the first place in writing this one? Does it match with how he or she views the information that he or she presented? Next, of course, is if the eyes can see it, then definitely it could be considered as a piece of textual evidence. It's as easy as that. If you can read it, okay, if you were able to establish a relationship and you know that this would clearly support whatever your interpretation is, whatever your belief is, whatever your opinion is of that particular text, then definitely you can use that as a piece of evidence. There are also certain things that are not directly stated but rather implied in a particular text or when you are reading a text. Okay, so definitely those pieces of information might lead you to making inferences. And you also need to know and consider that those inferences are considered valid. Okay, they might be valid as long as they are supported with other pieces of information, because some pieces of information would lead you to believe other things about that particular text or would lead you to believe, make other interpretations that are not directly stated in a particular text. Last but not the least, of course, are text features. Text features are very important because they are considered markers of information, which later we would be discussing as well. Okay, now let's describe what text features are. So, text features are simply certain things about these particular texts which the author chose to include, okay, or chose to use because the author wants to emphasize on something, wants to make the readers better understand, okay, provide a better understanding of what the text is all about. Some purposes of text features include, of course, just like what I have mentioned earlier, the author just wants to bring attention to important details or pieces of information. It also helps identify main ideas, keywords, and concepts. So the use of text features would help you identify main ideas, keywords, and concepts. Text features also activate schema or prior knowledge. So if you know something, you get triggered when you see a particular text features, and it helps you to remember the things that you already know about those particular parts of the text. Similarly, text features also provide information that may not be written in the text itself. So it would help you better understand the meaning behind, okay, or the concept, the idea that is being presented by the author without it being fully there. There are three categories of text features. The first one is the print feature, graphic feature, and then, of course, organizational features. Let's go at them one at a time. Now, let's go to the different print features. The first print feature is what we call the title. Of course, I guess you are all familiar with this one. This is simply described as the name that is located on the front cover or at the beginning of a chapter. So basically, this is the title of the text or the name of the text. The next one is the heading. Heading is almost similar to title. However, instead of being at the front, okay, being a title of the entire text, it is a title of a particular section of that text. Okay, so it is used to divide a section of a text and, of course, indicates the main idea of this particular section. The third print feature is bold print. Bold prints are used to, of course, emphasize something or give importance to a particular word. These are words written in a dark and thick print within the main body of a text. The fourth one is italics. Italics are simply fonts that are slanted to the right within the main body of a text. Okay, now why do we use italics or when do we use italics? Italics are used for titles of movies, songs, okay, TV shows, and so on and so forth. Italics are also used when we want to present foreign words, foreign phrases, okay. What else? When we introduce quotations, when we include quotations or quotes within our text, we also use italics. And there are so many other reasons and purposes for using these words or for using this particular print feature. But you have to remember that we use italics because, again, like similar to bold prints, we want to emphasize on these things. Next print feature is the caption. Captions are basically texts that are located near a picture, a map, a diagram, etc. And this piece of text is what explains the picture. It supports the picture that it is accompanying. So it's a description of what the picture is showing or what the picture is all about. The next print feature is the pronunciation guide. It is a phonetic representation of a word that is usually located in parentheses after the word has appeared in the text. So it is used, pronunciation guides are often used when we are, once again, presenting foreign words or foreign phrases, or if you're an author and you want your readers to know that this is how to pronounce a particular name, for example, then you can use a pronunciation guide. Another print feature is the bullet. These are listed texts that are indented and aligned using a dot, a symbol, or a dash in front of each idea. Now, bullets, we use them when we want to list down things. We want to enumerate things. For example, you want to give examples, okay? You want to give supporting ideas, but in short phrases or in words. So you can use bullets for that one. The next print feature is the sidebar. Sidebars are often additional texts that are located within a box. These are often presented with a shaded background. These are often located at the sides, that's why we call it sidebar in the first place, or even at the top or bottom of a page, as long as it is on the sides or located on the sides of that particular page. So let's try to review the different print features. These are title, heading, bold print, italics, caption, pronunciation guide, bullets, and the sidebar. Let's move on to the graphic features. Graphic features include, the first one is photograph. A photograph is best described as a picture that is taken by a camera. Now, the captions, like what I have mentioned earlier, will always explain or will always give an information about that particular photograph, okay, or particular picture. It will explain what is shown in that photo. The next graphic feature is drawing. Drawing is very different from photograph because a drawing is a hand-created sketch. If a photograph is created with a camera, now drawings are created using a hand of the artist. Now, again, a caption will explain what is in that particular drawing. The third graphic feature is an inset. An inset is a small photo, picture, or map inside or next to a larger picture. Basically, the purpose of an inset is magnifying a part of this large picture. So you are trying to zoom in, okay? When another picture is showing a zoomed in part of that particular part or particular picture, then that is what we call an inset. These are often seen on science textbooks, particularly those that would be talking about anatomy or biology and so on and so forth. Another graphic feature that you might have come across with on your science textbooks are what we call cross sections. Cross sections are pictures of a person, place, or thing that has been cut completely in half, with the open half facing forward so that the entire inside is revealed. So basically, you cut it in half and then you show that to your readers. Okay. Another one is a cutaway. A cutaway is basically a picture of an object with a part of its side dissolved, partially revealing the inside. If your cross section, you cut it, okay, you cut it in half and then you show it. In cutaway, you really didn't cut it in half. You just tried to open a part of it or try to remove a part of it, most likely the one that is covering the inside, so that the inside part will be revealed. So take this one, for example, the picture that you can see on your screen right now. That is what we call a cutaway. The sixth one is a diagram. This is a series of pictures with captions showing steps, stages, or the progression of events. Take, for example, a life cycle. That is an example of a diagram. Another one is what we call a labeled diagram. Of course, the only difference is that it is a picture with labels that usually have lines pointing to various parts, and of course including the names for those parts as well. Next, we have a map. I guess everyone is already familiar with this one. A map is best described as an aerial view picture showing the geographic location of something or someone. So you are showing a particular place, a physical setting wherein you can find another thing. Next is a graph. Graphs basically are data presented in diagram form, such as bar graph, which I guess you are all familiar with. Same with the example that I have provided, line graphs and or pie graphs. Now, sometimes there are particular pieces of information that could not be presented in a graph because, for one, there are way too many numbers. The difference between those numbers are very big, very huge, so it's very difficult to form graphs. Now, in those cases, instead of using graphs, we use a chart or a table. Now, when there are large amounts of information or data, like what I have mentioned earlier, you could just simply organize these pieces of information and try to condense them into columns and rows. And of course, you need to include headings as well. What are these numbers representative of? Next is a timeline. A timeline is a type of a timeline is actually a type of graphic organizer wherein events are listed in linear format, and of course it has to follow a particular time order. So these events have to be presented in the order that they occur. Let's try to review the different graphic features. This includes photograph, drawing, inset, cross-section, cutaway, diagram, label diagram, map, and a graph. And of course, charts or tables and timeline. Lastly, let's try to head to the different organizational features. The first organizational feature is the table of contents. Table of contents is usually located at the beginning of a particular text because this is the part where we try to list down the key topics in that book or in that text. And we try to include the page number and the order in which they are presented. The main purpose of having a table of contents is, of course, to ensure that the readers could easily find the topics, okay, the key topics that they are looking for without having to go through everything in the particular text or book. Next organizational feature is an index. An index, unlike the table of contents, it's located at the back of the book or a text. And more often than not, the index will contain specific topics. Unlike a while ago, wherein the table of contents only indicates key topics, index will contain specific topics specified already. This could be events, names, and other terms. More often than not, these are terms. And these specific terms are listed in alphabetical order together as well with the page number wherein you can find them. These are, like what I have mentioned earlier, more specific than the table of contents. Okay. Next one is the glossary. The glossary, just like the index, is located at the back of a book. Similarly, a glossary will also list down text important words and their definitions in alphabetical order. And sometimes it might also include a pronunciation guide. Basically, what you have to remember about glossaries is that these are like mini dictionaries at the end of the book. So, for example, if you are just trying to find out a meaning behind a particular text, or sorry, a particular term that was used, that was used in the book, you can just check the glossary out for its condensed definition. So let's try to review the different organizational features. These include table of contents, index, and glossary. Now let's move on to what kind of information can we see in a particular text. Now there are two types of information that we can see in a text. It could be explicit and it could be implicit. When we say explicit, basically the information is obvious, meaning you can always see it. You don't have to guess about it. When it's implicit, the information, the idea, the concept is something that you must infer from the explicit information that has been provided. So it's like you are trying to guess what it is about. However, it could still be supported by explicit information. Look at this example and answer the question that follows using explicit and implicit information. After you have found textual evidence, okay, the next step is, of course, to cite it in your own work. Now, citing textual evidence is basically looking back into the text for evidence, okay? Now, what's the reason for this? You just want to support an idea. Number one, you want to support an idea. Second is you want to answer a question or make a claim. Or simply, you are just thinking more deeply about the text, okay? You want to analyze the author or you want to analyze the source of the information. That is the reason why we cite textual evidence. Now, why do we have to do it? What's the reason for it? It is an important skill, especially right now, because the society that we live in, it's increasingly important for us to be more critical of what we read. It is not enough that just because it's there, we take it as is. Okay? It's not enough that we, just because you saw it posted on Facebook, for example, or was posted on any social media platform, and you believe it right away to be true. Okay? As readers, as consumers of different forms of text, you have to be critical of those that you have read. Similarly, whenever we cite or whenever we find textual evidence, it encourages us actually to use our higher level order thinking skills. So it enables us to analyze, interpret, make inferences, okay, be critical of the different things that we have just read or our eyes have just seen. Now, how do we cite evidence? You can simply remember this by remembering the word eyes. Again, these letters will stand for something else. First thing that you have to do when citing your textual evidence is, of course, introduce your quotation or I. Take, for example, this term. The girl had a bad dream. It's not enough for you to say that the girl simply had a bad dream. What made you say that the girl had a bad dream? So you can say that according to the narrator, the one that you have just read, the girl had a bad dream. That's the proper way of introducing your quotation, especially if the information that you are presenting came from the text itself. The next one is, of course, cite your source. It's not enough that you said, according to the narrator, the girl had a bad dream. Okay, so it could be, citing it that way could be considered incorrect. Which particular part of the text mentioned that the girl had a bad dream? Where can you find it? Okay, so you have to be specific on where you found this particular piece of information. So according to the narrator on page 7, the girl had a bad dream is a better way of putting it and citing your sources. The last one is, of course, explaining your quotation. So you are already done introducing your quotation. You are already done citing your source. Now, you have to explain why you even included this quotation or piece of text on your own work. Okay, so according to the narrator on page 7, the girl had a bad dream. This might be why the character is having so much trouble sleeping. Her bad dream might be caused by stress. So you try to explain the reason why you even put that thing in the first place on your own write up. Here are my sources and references. Thank you for listening.